I have received a letter from the honourable member for Maribyrnong proposing that a definite matter of public importance be submitted to the House for discussion, namely the government's failure to take responsibility for its illegal Robodebt scheme. And I call upon all those honourable members who approve of the proposed discussion to rise in their places, and I call the honourable member for Maribyrnong.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Today the matter of public importance concerns the government's failure to take responsibility for its illegal Robodebt scheme. It is remarkable, and it is a sorry state of Australian politics, that the current government has no one at all responsible for one of the biggest government social security scandals, indeed scandals, that this nation has ever seen. I speak, of course, of the $1.2 billion Robodebt scandal. I'll just explain briefly, for the benefit of those who are listening to the parliamentary broadcast, a little bit about Robodebt and then what the government knew and failed to do and what they ignored from external legal experts and the harm it has caused, and now the government's remarkable contortions of the truth as they seek to rationalise this fundamentally unlawful scandal. To begin with, just Robodebt itself. The amount of social security payments to which a recipient in Australia is entitled is calculated on the basis of their reported fortnightly income. On or about late April 2015, the Commonwealth, through Services Australia, introduced an automated debt-raising and recovery scheme known as the Online Compliance Intervention System, sadly more popularly well known as the Robodebt system. It was Social Security Minister Scott Morrison who took credit for this new development. The Robodebt system divided the annual income received by a recipient of social security benefits by the data obtained from the Australian Tax Office. So the essence of it was that they averaged a person's annual income according to tax data and gave it a notional 14-day average every 26 periods, every fortnight. What they did is they assumed that the social security recipient received this notional fortnightly income every week. And where there was a differential between what the social security recipient reported in a given fortnight, where perhaps they had obtained some work, then for another fortnight or another month or 3 months they were unemployed, what the government did is it said, well, if the tax office says this is what you get notionally every 14 days, then if there's a discrepancy between what the recipient told Social Security and what the tax office computer says, we will raise a debt against you. At the same time, they took out any human oversight, so once the tax office raised the red flag, it was treated as more than a red flag. It was treated as something that had to be disproved, but not disproved by the government who were making the allegation, but disproved by the person who they said had inappropriately received the social security payment. That is the Robodebt. They characterised the notional amount allocated by the tax office and said this is true. And if a social security recipient, due to the vagaries of work or whatever, had a different amount, bang, the social security recipient was deemed to be at fault, and they had to prove, go back many years, bank records, and they had to try and desperately prove to the government they hadn't claimed money falsely. This is Robodebt. But the problem is that the government discovered that Robodebt was wrong. Not, as the current minister says, sometime late last year, but they discovered it was wrong really from when the first notices started going out. What the government had done is unjustly enriched itself. It had breached its duty of care. It said it had powers under the Social Security Act to raise debts against our own citizens, which it simply didn't have. They didn't have the power. Now, they were notified as early as the 2nd of January 2017 there was a problem. I say today, and I challenge the minister to contradict me, that documents exist that prove that Minister Alan Tudge was warned in January of 2017 that a third of the debt notices were wrong. The Minister Alan Tudge was told that out of a sample of 5,290 Robodebts, 90% of them were wrong. They were told that debts had to be reduced. I challenge the government, if it is at all claiming to be truthful, to prove that, to assert that their senior officers weren't told on the 7th of January, the 8th of January, I challenge the government to prove that that documents do not exist, which show that on the 23rd of January 2017, that on the 24th of January 2017, on the 25th of January 2017, the documents weren't raised saying there is a problem here. Again, on the 1st of March, the minister was informed. Again, on the 15th of March, the government was informed of the need to change the system. On the 24th of April, Minister Tudge became aware of recommendations to change the system, and he never sought to contradict that. I challenge the government to say that they were never told on the 22nd of April of criticism by Professor Terry Carney that the scheme was illegal. I challenge the minister to prove that no document exists, that on the 18th of September, the then Minister for Human Services, Paul Fletcher, I mean, what government minister hasn't had their sticky fingerprints over this scandal? And I challenge them also to prove that they didn't know of 76 Administrative Appeals Tribunal decisions made by 50 different Administrative Tribunal members. I challenge them to prove that they were unaware of it. I challenge them to prove that they're unaware of the operation of Section 8F of the Social Security Act, which says that the government must take notice of administrative appeal tribunals. And this is the scandalous nature of this government's neglect and incompetence. It's class war against Centrelink recipients. They knew that whenever a vulnerable person, and they knew these were vulnerable people, whenever someone had the wherewithal, the resources, the support, the activists to get it to the AAT, this sly and cunning and mendacious government would settle the claim at the door. Yeah. Boom. No worries. They had a litigation strategy never to test the legality of their actions because they wanted to rake the money in off the weak and the vulnerable. Right. And what they would do, though, is they would settle it. What they should have done is one of two things. If they had a flood of decisions saying it was unlawful, they should have modified their policy. Or, if they didn't think that the decisions were right, they should have appealed them. They did neither. They ran a cynical, disgusting, mendacious, crooked scheme where they just hoped that they'd shut the people up who had the capacity to get through the system and appeal. They never changed what they were doing, and they never actually appealed the decisions which said that what they were doing is wrong. And also what makes this government mean, class warriors, picking on Centrelink recipients, treating them as second-class Australians, is they knew that this scheme was causing harm. I challenge the government to say that they don't have documents and voice recordings of desperate people ringing up Centrelink operators saying, "I don't know what to do, I'll take my own life." I challenge them to prove, because I say the documents exist, I can give them the dates. I know that one of the documents was about a call into Tamworth. I know that another one of the documents was a call into Queanbeyan. I know. And the reason why I know is they're in the pleadings of the class action. They're in the pleadings of the class action. And why do you think the government settled the claim? Because they never wanted this evidence out. That is why Labor's pushing for a Royal Commission. They knew that people were suffering great trauma and great harm. And let me go briefly to the defences of this government. This Minister Robert is doing to the law what Houdini ultimately did to escape artists, giving him a bad name. He says that it wasn't unlawful, there was not a sufficiency of law. What gobbledygook, half-twisted logic is that? There's not a sufficiency of law. You can just see them down at the criminal bar in Melbourne and Sydney, all those defence lawyers saying, "Your Honour, my client says what he did was not illegal. There was just not a sufficiency of law, Your Honour." And then they go on to say even worse, and this will horrify people listening. When we assert that Robodebt can be a trigger for people to self-harm and worse, he says, "Oh, we get suicide calls every day, threats of self-harm every day." Well, Minister, you may well, but not everyone complaining about Centrelink is having their complaint and their threat of self-harm triggered by illegal actions of the government. Yes, there are vulnerable people, but not all vulnerable people are complaining about actions which are triggered by the illegality of this government. So the government knew. The government acted unlawfully. They had no legal remit, no power to do it. And then this government, bald-faced lies, says, "Well, we've been doing it for 30 years. Bloody rubbish it's been going on for 30 years. Excuse my language, what rubbish? I'm calling those lies out, and every time you know it, you know the person saying it is lying. It was the online compliance scheme boasted by our own hose-holding Hawaiian Prime Minister. And the worst thing of all about this, no one's responsible. Yeah. No one is responsible. But what a coincidence, Deirdre Chambers. Scott Morrison, Alan Tudge, Paul Fletcher, Christian Porter, Stuart Robert, the ministers, I beg your pardon, the current ministers, they're all involved. They got Christine Holgate to resign for $3,000 watches. This mob should resign in shame.
The member's time has expired and I call the Minister for Government Services.